If I told you Wolfenstein 3D might soon be playable on your Sega Master System, would you believe me? Well, SMS Power forum member Under 4 MHz is currently working on porting Wolfenstein 3D to the Sega Master System. It's stripped down to the bare bones and it isn't nearly finished, but exists, which is impressive enough. I'm not a video game developer, but I'm well aware that creating a 3D-like environment on the Sega Master System anywhere near the way Wolfenstein 3D initially did is a feat. But to frame it, we need to talk about some of the other console ports that we did get. Not surprisingly, there is not another 8-bit port to compare it to, so we'll have to slide forward to the mighty 16-bit era. But first, for a quick rundown on Wolf 3D, it was released in 1992 for DOS developed by id Software. It used a 3D engine that utilizes ray casting to render the environment with 2D sprites for enemies and objects that initially began with Hover Tank and Catacomb 3D. It was an impressive game for the time, as most computers and games consoles were only capable of 2D environments and objects while running on 8 and 16-bit architecture. We eventually got a port to home consoles on the Super Nintendo in early 1994. That version ended up being developed by id Software and published by Imagineer. Even with a crazy accelerated development time, it looks like Wolfenstein and plays pretty well. But that shouldn't be surprising since id had a direct hand in making it. Now of course it isn't perfect. The elephant in the room is the low resolution of all the sprites and assets. You need to be close even to make out what you're even looking at, but far away, they break down to just a few pixels of color. So it's a fun challenge to try and identify what the enemy is doing down a hallway and try to get that shot to connect. Sprites also don't rotate and never face away from the character, and they all use the same sound effects, just pitched differently. So you can hear each boss say the exact same thing when they appear. The levels were also all condensed, with mini levels cut for a total of only 30. Honestly, don't mind this, the original Wolfenstein is a long game, especially as the floors get increasingly complex. But in terms of the accuracy of ports, it needs mentioning. Of course, the worst offender is the incredible amount of censoring, but that's a Nintendo problem, not an engine or coding problem. Now, I'm not comparing these to modern source ports or emulation. It's easy to call the SNES game inferior to some maxed out version in a source port with everything scaled up and streamlined. But even against the original DOS version, the SNES is missing key elements. We also can't forget the unusual Noah's Ark 3D created by WisdomTree that used the engine from id. It makes its trade-offs to get the game running on the Super Nintendo, such as a lack of textures on the floors and ceilings, and it has that rough sprite resolution. Now that's it for Wolfenstein on consoles for the era. There wouldn't be any other port until the Atari Jaguar and 3DO. But of course, there are other first-person shooters or other games that were trying to mimic the same style of 3D gameplay and design by the end of the 16-bit era. Doom even made it to the Super Nintendo with a custom engine designed by Randy Linden, and the Sega Genesis 32X got its port once again directly created by John Carmack based on the Doom Jaguar port. Wolfenstein 3D did make it to the Game Boy Advance in 2002 and is a direct port of the DOS original. Now it again suffers for the same lower resolution, and there is a weird issue where no music plays despite almost all of it existing in the code. While the GBA is often misunderstood as just a handheld SNES, and it isn't that cut and dry. Its different hardware and other coding decisions allowed for a surprisingly accurate port on a handheld. Remember, that has been 10 years since the initial release. This port on the Sega Master System is still early in development, but it's already impressive. I can't think of any other game on the system that attempted anything like it. The closest would be Phantasy Star, but the first-person dungeons were a primitive, almost full-motion video. They are bare with no enemies, items, or decorations, just an endless sea of colored bricks. Wolfenstein 3D on the Sega Master System is currently solid color walls, something that resembles doors, and fundamental enemies and items. Of course, not everything works as intended yet, but the fact that any of it does is incredible. The status bar is there and everything functions, but sadly BJ has a stoic blank stare right now, no animation from being shot, and no darting looks around the room. BJ is holding a gun, and the firing animation it does work, but it's a bit of a bummer how small that handgun is. Even that muzzle flash is just a wee bit of fire. Look at that baby pistol, it's so cute killing Nazis. Good for you, baby gun. There are currently no other guns in the game. At one point, I came across the machine gun, and despite technically picking it up, I couldn't switch to it or use it. Enemies are present, but right now they are just the lowest tier guard. They have animations and will attack you, but it's simple. Their attacks hit you, but only make 1 point of damage right now. You can see them move and fire, but they don't go anywhere, and I don't think they rotate yet, so they're always facing you. It's surprising that they have a full death animation even from really far away when the sprite is scaled down to just a few pixels. Yes, sprite scaling is here again, similar to the SNES port. Up close they look just like the guards, but far away they can be minimized to just a few blocks of color. But up close they are well detailed and nice interpretations of the original. The only bizarre issue is sometimes when you turn to the left or right, they scale too much and almost always seem to float into the wall or well above the floor. There is currently no boss to be found, not that I think you can ever get to him, because after the first level, it's tough to find your way out of the levels. I mean, everything is one color, and doors are just another color. When you exit, you interact with an empty room. I could not find my way out of the second floor. Items also exist, you can pick them up, but they are generally not completely implemented. They don't pop up until you are right next to them, and even when you pick them up, there's no sound, so you just slip right past them and they vanish. Music and sound effects do exist though, and the rework theme is perfectly recognizable and perfectly Sega Master System. But the little pickup sound, doors opening, and sadly the guard voice are still missing. Just a jaunty tune and gunfire. I could not get this to run on actual hardware right now. I tried on my Sega Genesis using a Mega EverDrive X7, and the ROM would boot but would not recognize any controller I tried. So I couldn't get past the start screen. Unfortunately, I don't have an SMS flash card at this time to try it on my original Master System. A few emulators didn't work either, but it runs using Genesis Plus GX and SMS Plus GX. There is footage on YouTube of someone playing it using a Mega SG and apparently a Mega EverDrive Pro, but sadly original hardware seems out of the equation at this point. Under 4 MHz though is still working on it and going strong for a demo first posted in only June of this year. With the release of the 1.06 version I played, they had a running list of things they're currently working on and implementing. Enemy moving logic, damage based on distance, more enemy sprites, sound effects, an end boss, and plenty more. I won't read the whole thing to you, but I'll link to the thread on SMS Power for you to read and check out. Even though this is about the SMS version, they're also crazily working on versions for the SG-1000 and Game Boy as shown here. This one is a little glitchy though, and I wouldn't actually consider it playable yet. So that's Wolfenstein 3D on the Sega Master System in a nutshell. Before I conclude the video though, I want to talk about another homebrew version for another comparison. The Sega Genesis also has its own Wolfenstein 3D Homebrew that has been around for a few years. Unlike the Super Nintendo, it is a more direct port of the DOS version with full episodes, tons of levels, and being homebrew, no censoring at all. The extreme dithering and resolution were interesting ways to make the game playable and much more intact than the SNES version. If it's a better way to do it is up for debate, but I like it better than the SNES version's sprite scaling and low resolution. But saying that, it can also be a bit hard on the eyes, especially for extended playtimes. However, if you play it on a CRT or with emulated scanlines, it does help. I feel like this is a great port and a wonderful what if for the system, something I hope the SMS version will end up being. So that's the homebrew version of Wolf 3D for the Sega Master System and plenty more. Again, this is a super fun and impressive port, even in this very early build. I look forward to seeing what under 4 MHz does with this and how far it can go. I know it's a game that doesn't need another port, and Wolfenstein 3D does not have the same love that Doom has, but imagine if this works. What other fun homebrew games we can get using this engine. Seeing hardware push like this so many decades later is always fantastic as well. So that's it for this episode of RetroActive. Let me know your thoughts about seeing Wolfenstein 3D on the Sega Master System. I'll leave links in the description below so you can check it out yourself, and as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Hey, this is Kevin. Once again, thanking you so much for watching another episode of RetroActive. But if you liked it, please hit that like button, subscribe, leave a comment, all the stuff I'm supposed to say. And I also want to remind you that I do have a Ko-fi account and a Discord. Links will be in the description. Bye!